The new PSP Wobbler is a modulation effect, and it sounds really familiar, somewhat like a phaser, a flanger or a notch filter, like everything of these together, but not really like any one of these. So, on the great Amber synth, here's a phaser, a flanger, a notch filter, and here's Wobbler. There's even somewhat of a shepherd tone-like effect going on. Wobbler is a type of effect which, when you push it, is basically a sound in itself, regardless of the input. The plugin is based upon an effect used by Alan Parsons on recordings by, for instance, Pink Floyd. It uses frequency shifting, and based on the phase differences between dry and wet signal, you get this specific effect, in both upward and downward moving direction. Let's listen to Wobbler, so here it is on a loop to spice things up. Without Wobbler, this loop is pretty stale. With Wobbler, it already gets more interesting and vibey, even though this loop needs more to get really interesting. Let's add Wobbler to the snare of this loop only. It adds an interesting flavor. Play around with wobble to find the sweet spot. Speaking about sweet spot, changing the rate can drastically change the sound. Here it is again on the same loop. Listen most and for all to the snare. Wobbler adds a lot of movement and variation to the sound. It's almost like the snare becomes a hand clap from time to time when you listen to it in the mix. This is very interesting to experiment with. Before we continue, please make sure to subscribe to stay in the loop on the latest new plugins. And hit that little like button. Wobbler has a few interesting extra controls, like spread. The spread dial makes the wobble wider in the stereo fields by panning this wobble. The panning is synced. You have to be careful not to overdo it, it can get out of phase. When you play with the wobbler mount, you can get this back into phase. The glide dial makes that when you change the rate speed, it takes a little while for Wobbler to get to that new rate speed. In combination with spread, this can almost sound like a rotary effect. H changes the saturation of this plugin, from smooth to very sharp. This works in combination with drive, and when you push this one a lot, it also reduces the effect of the wobbling a bit. You will notice with this plugin that changing one dial or another will affect another one. Everything affects each other in some way. You really want and need to play with all dials. Overall, I really like the sound of Wobbler, it really has its own flavor. It sounds familiar to existing effects like flanger, phaser, and I think when you use these type of effects a lot, absolutely check out Wobbler to find out if it has a place in your audio toolshed.